Hi, friends. Will Davis Jr. here with 40 something, less than 50 conversations about the Old Testament. Thanks for joining in. As always, please send your cards, comments, questions, complaints. I enjoy them to senior pastor, maybe not the complaints, to senior pastor at acfellowship.org. This is lesson number 41. I told you, I think the day before, that Ezekiel was lesson number 39. It was actually lesson number 40. I was off one. This is lesson number 41. We're almost done. Talking to you today about the book of Daniel and the prophet Daniel that the book is about and probably by. So Daniel and his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, not their Hebrew names, but their Babylonian given names, were deported back to Babylon from Jerusalem, probably in the early 590s, 593, 594, somewhere in there. Jerusalem, as you know, would fall ultimately in 586 BC when the Babylonians came back and said, we're done. But there was an initial deportation of some of the finest youth to go back to Babylon and be trained in the king's ways, eat at the king's table, and learn the king's education, his religion, etc., 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 in an effort to make good citizens of Babylon out of these young Jewish youth. From day one, Daniel and his friends faced test after test after test. And chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4 all reveal these great challenges. Chapter 5, these great challenges these young men faced, and how they were steadfast, and they were not going to, just because, again, we said this a couple days ago, just because they were in exile doesn't mean they were going to bail on their God. And boy, were they in exile. So even in chapter 1, they say, look, let us not do the king's training. Let's do our training and eat our diet and trust us and see. Daniel is tested and thrown in the lion's den because of his commitment to prayer, and they knew they'd catch him in prayer, and so they set a trap and find him praying. They said, you only pray to the gods of the Babylonians, and Daniel prays to the God of Israel, and they throw him in the lion's den, and God rescues him. In chapter 3, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to worship this statue that Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they're thrown in the fiery furnace, and they see not just the three young men surviving in the fire, but they see a fourth looking like a son of the gods. That would be Jesus, walking with them in the fire. So it's a really great book on how would you do in exile, and how strong is your faith, and would you cave to the gods of the nations, or would you stay true to your God in difficulties? And friends, we're being asked that question right now in our culture. One of the great themes of Daniel is that God is the God of the nations, and he proves this by humbling Nebuchadnezzar, who stood up one day and said, look at Babylon the Great that I have built. And God said, not so fast. And immediately humbled Nebuchadnezzar and made him basically lose his mind. Sent him out in the wilderness, and he lived like an animal for probably 7 years, until the scriptures say he came to his senses. Same word used to the prodigal. He came to his senses in the pig trough and said, I'm going back to God. Nebuchadnezzar came to his senses and looked up to heaven and gave honor to God, and his memory and his rationale was restored, and he gave honor to God and promoted Daniel and worshiped the living God. And God said, there's no God but me, and there are no nations that I'm not above, even pagan ones like this one. Great story in Daniel. Daniel prophesies a lot, and there's the latter half of Daniel is a lot of prophecy about the immediate centuries following the empires that would come, including the Greco-Roman Empire and what would happen to them. There's also a lot of prophecy about the days in the distant future when the end of the world will come, and what will happen in Jerusalem and other places as the end of the ages are ushered in. So there's both immediate prophecy and long-term prophecy. There's great teaching on spiritual warfare and how an angel was dispensed to support Daniel in his prayer and fasting, but he was unable to get there for 21 days because he was held up by a demon over an area. And it gives us some insight into the assignment in the heavenlies of demons and angels and how they fight each other, and how it isn't always just a slam dunk. It requires prayer and fasting and waiting. One of the best themes in the book of Daniel is the phrase that's introduced in the phrase, Son of Man. You might remember in Jesus' Gospels, he calls himself the Son of Man. The Son of Man, you'll see the Son of Man coming in the clouds. You'll see the Son of Man doing this. And the Son of Man says this. He's talking about himself. He didn't make that name up. It's a messianic name given to the Messiah in Daniel. And this is what made the Jews so mad, because when he says, when you see me, the Son of Man, coming, you'll know I'm the Son of Man. And he's like quoting Daniel. And they all knew Daniel was pointing to the coming Christ, the coming Messiah. So Jesus read Daniel, heard the phrase Son of Man, and said, that's talking about me. I got to use that to describe that's who I am. So the one you read about centuries before from Daniel, who said there's going to come and set things up and set the world up in the right way and his kingdom is going to endure forever, that's me. So Daniel's got wonderful action, wonderful stories of the faithfulness of God over the nations, wonderful stories of men who refuse to bow in the face of unbelievable suffering and persecution. And the story of Jesus himself, seeing himself in Daniel and the prophecies of his name centuries before. It's a great book. Read it and enjoy it. Okay, I think tomorrow we get to something really exciting. I'll tell you tomorrow when I see you. Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for this time. Thank you for the example of Daniel. Help us to be as bold and brave as he was. I pray in your name. Amen.